Welcome to The Hidden Load, the podcast where we uncover the unseen weight carried by the educators and leaders in medicine and explore how to lighten it. I am Dr. Santina or Tina Wheat. I am a family physician, an educator, a leader, and a coach. Each week, we will dig into the challenges that often go unspoken, from burnout and boundaries to purpose and identity to figuring out sustainability, and share practical tools to help you move from chaos to calm and from burnout to balance. Because the hidden load does not have to be yours to carry alone, and in fact, shouldn't be. Let's get started. This is episode number 3, Boundaries, Protecting Your Energy Without the Guilt. Now, if you have been with me for the past 2 episodes, then you know we started by naming what the hidden load is and how that leads to burnout. And then we talked about balance, and we reimagined it as something that was dynamic and not something that was a scale. But the dynamic balance is like a ballerina constantly adjusting or someone shifting on a balance board. And today, we are turning that topic into something that is central to whether balance is even possible, and that is boundaries. And let me just name it. Boundaries are one of the hardest things for healthcare professionals to talk about, let alone to practice. I myself know that it was very hard to shift my mindset and start incorporating boundaries into my everyday. And I know that some of you might be thinking, boundaries? I don't need any more walls between me and my patients, or me and my students, or me and my learners, or my peers. Or maybe you're thinking, I've tried boundaries before and they just made me feel worse. They made me feel guilty, or they made me feel selfish. And if that is you feeling those things, then I want to tell you, you are not alone. Boundaries are one of the biggest struggles that I see in coaching healthcare professionals, and they often come wrapped in a whole host of emotions like guilt and fear and a sense of letting someone down. And to be honest, this has been one of the hardest but most important tools that I had incorporated into my own home and professional life. Because here's the thing. We know that boundaries are important. I would hazard to guess that you have even told someone else that they had to hold better boundaries. But it's one of those things that is easier said than done. Because when it comes to our own lives, that's where the guilt shows up. That is when the questions creep in of, am I letting someone else down? Or am I being selfish? Or am I not a team player? But the truth is, boundaries are not about shutting people out. Boundaries are about creating a space so that you can actually show up more fully, more sustainably, and truthfully with more compassion. And so today, we are going to unpack why boundaries feel so hard, particularly in healthcare. We're going to unpack what happens when we don't have them, and then also how to start building boundaries that protect your energy without adding to that guilt. And then I will even give you a few practical scripts that you can practice using even this week. And then finally, at the end, I'm going to share with you a free resource, my 7-day boundary challenge. This challenge can help you actually put boundaries into practice. Okay, let's get started. Starting with, why do boundaries feel so hard? It is always helpful to start with the why. Boundaries feel so difficult, particularly for those of us in medicine and in education. First, there's the training. From day one, we are taught to prioritize others' needs over our own. Those others might be a patient, a learner, a colleague. We are just told, and it might be explicitly or implicitly, that being a good professional means that we always have to be available. And that might look like answering the call, saying yes. And you might be saying to me, well, we are in a profession where we have signed up to care for other people. And that is absolutely true. And we're going to talk about that soon. The second reason why boundaries are so hard is the culture in healthcare. Healthcare culture prizes self sacrifice. I want you to think about the stories that we celebrate. It is often the doctor who stayed up all night to find that discovery or to take care of that patient. It's the nurse who skipped meals or stayed late to take care of the patient. It's the educator who went above and beyond. Rarely, if ever, do we tell stories about that prized educator or clinician who protected their rest or their lunch hour, or the educator who said no to an extra committee to spend time with their kids. Those are not the folks who get the accolades. Those stories don't get the applause. And then there is the professional identity. Many of us choose this work because we are compassionate, we are empathetic, and we are driven people. And the boundaries can feel like they go against the core of all of those things. And then, in addition to feeling like we're going against the core, let's add guilt to the mix. There's that internal voice that might whisper to you, if I set this limit, then I'm letting someone else down. If I say no, then I'm not a team player. That guilt is so incredibly powerful, but it is also misleading and not true. And so I want you to take a moment and pause and think about this. When was the last time that you didn't set a boundary because you were worried about the guilt? You were worried about that inner voice. What was the outcome? Did it actually serve you? Did it make you feel better? Or did it serve the other person? Did it make them feel better? There have been so many times when someone asked me if I could do something, and I said yes. And when I did that, I didn't have a boundary because I was worried about disappointing them or letting them down. But then I performed that task, or I went to the meeting and I stressed myself out to get it done. And some of the times it worked out. I'm not going to lie. But some of the times I then felt frustrated because it turned out that the request wasn't actually urgent. I only thought it was, or it was presented as urgent. And then that meant that I was overwhelmed from the rush and felt resentful that I spent the time when I found out later that it wasn't actually urgent. And so that leads me to our next section of what actually happens when you don't hold boundaries. Most of us probably don't have to think that hard to come up with a time where we didn't hold boundaries and became frustrated because of it. Because unfortunately, we have all lived it and it happens so often. Without boundaries, we become overcommitted and we become exhausted. Our calendars might fill with obligations that we don't even remember saying yes to, and somehow we are beholden to. We end up working late. We miss family moments or commitments. We neglect our own rest or health. And then comes the resentment. And resentment is one of the clearest signs that you are missing a boundary. If you notice yourself that you are getting frustrated with your patients, with your colleagues, and even with your family or loved ones, then that frustration doesn't indicate that you just don't care, but it probably means that you have said yes too many times when your energy or your heart should have been saying no, or was saying no and you just didn't listen. And I have been there myself. There was a season when I thought that I always had to be available and that I was being a good colleague by always covering that extra patient or taking on that extra committee or that extra shift. At first, it felt noble, but over time, it just led to frustration and even bitterness. And it wasn't because I didn't care about the work or the people or even find the work fulfilling, but it meant that I hadn't protected my own limits and I wasn't protecting my ability to show up. And this even happened recently. I was asked to show up to a meeting and I rearranged my schedule because I thought that this meeting was urgent and important. And this was the only way it could be there. And in order to show up, I missed dropping off my kids at school. I rearranged other meetings and I rearranged my own clinical time. And when I got there, they didn't actually have information for me. And do you know what? What I should have said when I was asked to come to that meeting was, could you send me the information that you need me to respond to? And I will show up prepared at the following meeting. But that is not what I did. And I was frustrated. And my frustration goes along with what the research tells us. Studies consistently show that professionals with stronger boundaries are able to report lower burnout rates and greater job satisfaction. That day, I was not satisfied. And it wasn't about caring less, it is about caring in a way that is sustainable. And so I want you to reflect for just a moment. Where in your life right now are you feeling resentment creeping in? What missing boundary might that resentment be pointing to? And is that resentment at home or at work? It could be in either place because we need to hold boundaries in both of those places. So let's shift to the how. How do we actually start building boundaries that are able to protect our energy and able to do that without adding to the guilt? And I do want to reiterate that you might need to hold boundaries at home or you might need to hold the boundaries at work. The first step is to clarify your boundaries. And the reason why is boundaries make the most sense when you know what it is that you're protecting. I want you to ask yourself, what matters to me most in this season of my life? And remember, the season of your life changes. And so what you prioritize changes. Sometimes it's going to be family dinners. Sometimes it's going to be ensuring that you have time for rest and exercise. Sometimes it's going to be mentoring trainees. These are going to shift between home and work. But once you are clear, every yes and every no can be measured against that priority. Moving on to the second step, and that is to start small. Boundaries do not have to be huge in order to be important. You don't need sweeping changes. In fact, sometimes when you make sweeping changes, it makes it more uncomfortable and feels an additional layer of guilt. So you can even start with micro boundaries. So some of these small changes might look like not checking email after a certain hour or blocking 20 minutes every day so that you can eat lunch without charting at the same time. It might be pausing before you answer and automatically agree to something. My favorite micro boundary is using my do not disturb on my phone that starts as I'm winding down to help me sleep. These small shifts all add up. The small shifts are able to make huge changes for you. And the third step is to reframe the guilt. Boundaries don't help if you're heaping on a pile of guilt. And so instead of asking, who am I going to let down by saying no? I want you to shift the question and instead ask, who benefits when I say yes to myself? Who benefits when I protect myself? In addition to you, it is often your patients, your family, and your learners because you are showing up healthier, calmer, and more present. And then the fourth step is to practice the words. We practice so many parts of medicine. We practice procedure and conversations with patients, but sometimes we need to practice knowing how to say our boundaries.
And so I want to share a couple of scripts that you can try out. So the first is, I would love to help, but I don't have the capacity to take that on right now. Or maybe you could try, that's a great idea. Let's revisit that in a few months when I can give it the attention it deserves. And another one is, I am not the best person for this, but I can suggest someone who might be. So in each of those scenarios, our phrases do two things. The first is they set a limit. And the second is it maintains or preserves the relationship. And so I want to invite you into a quick exercise. Think of one situation that is coming up in the next week where you might be able to set a boundary. Which of these scripts feels the most natural for that situation? How could you adjust it slightly for what you might have to say? And can you practice saying it out loud before you need it? Because when we practice, it comes by so much more naturally. And then finally, here is the reframe that I would like to leave you with. Boundaries are not selfish. Boundaries are how we are able to stay generous. I want you to think of the most common example that we hear, and that's placing your oxygen mask on the plane. Putting yours on first does not mean that you care less. It means that you are protecting your ability to help others. And so boundaries work in exactly the same way. You are able to protect your energy in order to help others. I would like to take that one step further, especially for those who are educators and those of us who are leaders in medicine. When we set boundaries, it is not just about protecting our own energy. It is also about modeling to others that boundaries are actually possible, that boundaries are actually acceptable, and they are healthy, and that they are good for all of us. Because here is the truth. If we never model boundaries, our students, our residents, our colleagues, our junior faculty, they all learn from us that boundaries don't belong in healthcare. And what happens then? Well, we train and lead a whole generation of professionals who believe that they should never say no. A whole generation who live in constant overwhelm and who are at high risk for burnout. That is not the legacy that I want to leave. And so when you set a boundary, you are not just protecting yourself. You are also giving permission to the people that you lead and teach and mentor to be able to do the same. You are showing them that you can be compassionate and also have limits. You can be committed and also protect your own well-being. That in itself is powerful leadership and, I would argue, powerful education. So today we spoke about boundaries, why they feel hard, what happens when we do not set them, and how we can begin setting them and do it without the guilt. We looked at small, practical ways to start, and we even practiced a few scripts together. And I hope that those scripts are helpful for you. And then we reframed boundaries, not just as a way to protect ourselves, but as a way to lead and to teach others to thrive. I hope that this conversation has been helpful. And if this conversation is striking a chord with you, then I want to invite you into something that can help you take that next step. It is my free 7-day boundary challenge. For 1 week, you will receive a short daily practice to build stronger boundaries. It is just one small step each day. You get one email with one video a day. It is simple and it is doable. And it is designed for healthcare professionals just like you. You can sign up at the link in the show description. And I would love to hear from you. What boundaries are you going to start holding? Or what did you start holding as part of the challenge? Send me this message and any other comments or topics that you would like to hear on this podcast to Santina at santinawheat.com. And if you would like more practical strategies in conquering your chaos to get to calm, then check out my website at www.santinawheat.com. I want to thank you for spending this time with me today in episode number 3, Boundaries, Protecting Your Energy Without the Guilt. And if today's conversation resonated with you, then I would like to ask you to do 3 things. The first is to subscribe or follow the show so that you are notified of every episode as it comes out. The second is to leave a rating or a review. It helps other educators and leaders in medicine find this podcast, and it helps remind me that these conversations are worth having. And the third is to share this episode with a colleague who might need to hear that what they are carrying is not theirs alone, that we are doing this together. Because here is the truth. Holding everyone else up should not mean that you lose yourself in the process. And before we wrap up, let me give you a preview of what is coming up next week. In episode number 4, we will be talking about self-advocacy, why it feels uncomfortable in healthcare, how learning to advocate for yourself can actually make you a stronger advocate for your patients, your team, and your family. And until then, remember, boundaries do not close you off. They actually give you room to breathe, to heal, to lead, and to model a healthier way forward for the people who are watching you. And they give you the ability to show up as your best self. Thank you for listening and for choosing to protect your energy one boundary at a time.
Thanks for joining me on The Hidden Load. Tag me on Instagram at Dr. Tina Wheat or email me at santina@santinawheat.com with your takeaways and ideas. Don't forget to subscribe, and until next time, let's lighten your hidden load.